3, 2, 1, there we are. So yeah, welcome everybody. I hope you can all hear us and see us clearly. If not, then drop a message in the chat. But otherwise, I'm really excited to start the new year with none other than Greg Osuri. This is actually like the third time you're on the channel, but the first time only on a one-on-one. So we did this like 1.5 years ago with Fabian Dure, if you remember, the very first show. And you were actually one of the first guests in Cosmos that we ever talked to. So we were, back then a little bit nervous also. And I mean, since then, this was all before Cosmoverse even existed. This was before Friends Validator, which what is they're doing now came up, and early stages also of Stakecito and cryptocito. So first of all, Greg, it's really cool to have you here as a one-on-one show, do a deep dive on Akash, and also thanks for everything you've been doing over the past year and a half, 2 years, also ever since we met, and all the support you gave, even the simple retweets, but you've done it since the beginning. So thanks for that. And yeah, glad you're here. How is everything going on your end?
It's great. I mean, it's funny to think that Akash was like, we did this show a year and a half ago. I guess he was in Lisbon.
Yeah.
Or when IBC came out, right? Akash was the first IBC transaction that ever happened between Akash and Cosmos Hub. It's been a long time.
Yeah, and well, just actually a few minutes ago, maybe we can start right away. You dropped a major announcement, and it's actually funny. We're going to talk about this later as well. But Avalanche dropped this major announcement yesterday about partnering with AWS, right, which is one of the most centralized, or like the most centralized cloud provider in the world right now, probably the largest one. And then you guys drop an announcement today, and it's all about decentralization, right? So maybe you can explain a little bit what this announcement is all about. In the meantime, I'm going to find the link, and I'm going to drop it here in the chat box for everybody that's live tuned in.
Absolutely. Well, so lots of thoughts on the Avalanche, but I think before we get there, first of all, the Akash announcement we just made like few minutes ago. It's really not an announcement. It's more of like, codifying what we've been doing in the last few years. When we launched Akash Network, even before we launched, from the beginning of development, we were completely open source in terms of code base, right? And we obviously launched open source. We've been open source for a long time, for over 5 years. Today, we are taking the step of further decentralizing by open sourcing the process that creates the code. So why that's important is, even though the source code is open and anyone can modify and anyone can, make their own versions, they don't get to actually make changes to the upstream, because upstream is still controlled by a single company, Overclock Labs, which I work for, and the Akash team, most of the Akash team members work for. So we want to, if anything, 2022 showed us how delicate these corporate structures are, and how many attack vectors these corporate structures have, right? Including companies like Overclock Labs, which is a American-based company, a US-based company. So we're thinking further on, like, how do we really ensure resiliency of Akash Network, and also, embrace our community to actually like contribute in a lot better way. And the answer was radically open source, in the sense that we can't just be like, closed on the process, open on the outcome. We have to be open on the process to actually produce better open outcomes. So we embarked on an experimentation called radical decentralization by taking examples of successful projects like Kubernetes and designing a community group model where you have, essentially 3 sets of groups, where the first set of groups is called special interest groups. These are different groups comprised of customers, comprised of providers and whatnot, that all use Akash in a manner or so, and want to contribute and want to make changes to it. And then we have these are groups that are permanent, like groups for provider management. There are groups for machine learning. There's groups for GPUs and whatnot, right? And then you have the working groups, which are essentially groups that work across different special interest groups that combine all the requirements and actually create a technical specification for engineer to develop. And then we have user groups that comprises of just different types of users like miners and whatnot, right? And all that combined together will eventually create a specification that will be publicly funded by the treasury for anyone to write code. Not only overclock employees, but anybody in the world can take up the spec and actually earn a decent living income. So now we are actually incentivizing developers that are stuck in like fancy jobs at like Facebooks and Googles of the world that want to contribute to open source and they want to contribute to decentralization, but can't really now can have that opportunity. So now we are solving a huge problem, which is attracting talent. We are attracting talent. We are hiring talent by not hiring, right? And that's really where decentralization, has its strengths, and we are embracing the decentralization. I'm super excited for this new direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think on the note of decentralization, I think, I'm not a very technical person. So for me, whenever I hear those things, I'm like, man, there's so many different layers to it, than just node distribution, right? Or voting power distribution or governance, which is oftentimes labeled as, okay, if that's distributed, then yeah, it's decentralized. But maybe talk about in general, for especially the non-technical audience, what might be a big misconception around decentralization, and what layer does Akash as a project actually aim to decentralize here?
Absolutely, it's a good question. Now, if you look at decentralization as an onion, right, you start peeling different layers, right? Yeah, the outside of the onion looks great, but you really want to know how the inside is. So you start peeling different layers, then you'll start seeing attack vectors, right? Yes, the first layer obviously is governance, and you see that happen on MinScan, and people vote on it. People have the drama, the DPS metric that we have in Composable. All those generate at the governance level, right? So, and you further peel down, you ask a question: who's actually writing the proposal? Well, is it a validator, is it a community member, or is it like the real team member asking a validator to do that? Most often than not, we have real team members that pretend validators to post the proposal. Then you take that out, and then you look at, okay, who's actually writing the code? Who actually decided to do this proposal? And you keep peeling the layers, and you ultimately discover there is just a few group of people that ultimately make decisions. And that's where decentralization breaks. So decentralization is, everybody has different definitions, but for me, it's about reducing or diminishing attack vectors that compromise a network. Mm-hmm. Right? That could be a human attack vector, that could be a technology attack vector, that could be a societal attack vector. Doesn't really matter. Removing those attack vectors to create most resilient systems. And so today, the attack vector, we have done a pretty good job in like decentralizing, the different layers that touch the end user. But when it comes to institutional risks, right, we see that with regulatory enforcement. We see that with just monetary failures, just systemic failures, like we see with FTX and whatnot. We see quite a lot of institutional risk that is not very transparent to a lot of people, right? And so even Ethereum, as a matter of fact, Ethereum Foundation is still the steward of Ethereum, development. They hold the keys for the GitHub. In that sense, Cosmos is a lot more decentralized as an ecosystem than Ethereum is, because ICF doesn't really control, the flow, right? So we have like people like Osmosis and, so many other protocols are now actually contributing to the core Cosmos source code, right? So now I feel like, if you peel enough layers and you ask enough questions, you ultimately see like who's actually responsible for writing the code, who's actually responsible for defining the spec. I think, and then you'll find answers. Now, besides, if you take the social, risk away, then you had a technology risk, right? So Avalanche announcement was not a very exciting announcement. It is actually, Amazon Web Services trying to sell Activate program. For those of you that don't know, Activate is a program Amazon has for attracting startups. So you get a bunch of free credits if you're a startup company when you apply to the program. So Avalanche was accepted in the Activate program, Anyone can apply for that. You don't have to be an Avalanche to. You don't have, and what they've done is they've secured a deal so that Avalanche related startups can actually get free credits. Like every VC has that program. Like when you go to VC, they're like, oh, you get Amazon free credits because the VC goes to Amazon Activate and actually bargains a deal saying that, hey, I'm going to give you more users. You give some free credits to the users to hook them up, and then then it's just Amazon trying to sell more. And Avalanche, for some reason, decided to make that a big deal and pump their token up by 20%. So I don't know how good or bad Avalanche technology is, but things like this make it's kind of disgusting, to be honest with you. It reminds me of the VeChain people taking pictures in front of McDonald's and saying there's a partnership with McDonald's, right? Like, so I don't know. It's just sort of like disappointing that we see this sort of like gimmicks, we call them marketing gimmicks, that happen. And then the second part is like, well, do Amazon node providers running on Amazon, Avalanche node providers running on Amazon, that make Avalanche more secure or more decentralized? I mean, sure, there's over concentration, right? So I'm not like, I think we fair to say we graduated the camp that AWS is bad or Google is bad, Microsoft is bad. I think really comes down to how much of node concentration power is at any given provider, right? What we want is heavily distributed node concentration rather than heavily focused node concentration. So it doesn't really matter if Amazon is running, as long as most nodes are not running on Amazon or a significant majority is not running on Amazon, you have less risk, right? So, as a matter of fact, I would even welcome Amazon's effort to actually attract, Amazon and Google and Microsoft as well. We've seen quite a lot of like organized effort for these companies to recognize Web3. I think that's only going to play out better for Web3 instead of taking someone like Hetzner, who's been anti-Web3 and anti-crypto. That's not good for anybody, right? So I don't have a problem with Amazon. I do have a problem with Avalanche. I think that's just a very gimmicky, very bad way to make an announcement. So that's just my take.
Yeah, I just also had some ideas about what you talked about, the social layer in terms of decentralization and also decentralized organization. I think that's a very interesting topic. And on that note, also, like what we did also with Cosmoverse, this would never be possible in any other ecosystem in crypto, because the major conference in Ethereum is run by the Ethereum Foundation. The major conference in Cardano is run by probably IOG, right? Polkadot, Parity, right? You have all these major also marketing and communications. The roadmap is being decided by that organization, right? In Cosmos, we just had an on-chain proposal for a new roadmap for a multi-billion-dollar crypto ecosystem in production on mainnet, right? So I think that aspect is very, very interesting. But I still think in Cosmos also, we need a little bit more, more people that contribute, more people that provide constructive feedback. And I think it's sometimes hard to like incentivize them also to do that, right? But it seems like with that announcement that you did, and I like what you said earlier, we're actually hiring without, like we're hiring people without actually hiring them. I think that's a fun analogy to describe what today means for you. But on that note, what do you think in Cosmos? You mentioned that you feel like it's more decentralized than most other ecosystems, but specifically in Cosmos, like where do you think Cosmos as an ecosystem could be more decentralized?
I mean, I think instead of more decentralized, it could be more organized is a better sort of like question to ask, right? I think it's very decentralized, and I think it's getting even more decentralized with Tendermint shutting down and all that. The folks that actually started Cosmos are now out of the picture, which is extremely an amazing way to look at the ecosystem. They are in the picture, but they're acting more like contributors instead of like leaders, or sorry, bad word, instead of like the folks that instead of dictators, just put it that way, right? I mean, as much as we love Ethereum, Vitalik is still the undefeated dictator of Ethereum, right? Like we don't have that figureheads in Cosmos, which makes it extremely decentralized. I don't think and the decentralization is happening organically. um, and I can't ask for better, right? Like, of course, one thing I would ask for is how can we get more organized, and move at the same time without compromising our values, right? And that's
Mm.
challenging. So that's one of the reasons why the special interest group model that we are proposing, and Akash, could work out, right? And it works out, when you have the hyper discipline that doesn't compromise values. So we think the model that we propose is still is pioneering. Nobody has done this before. We're going to see how it works out, and we're going to see what challenges we're going to face, right? We're learning quite a lot from projects that have done this sort of thing in Web 2 before, Kubernetes and whatnot. We're learning from their mistakes. We're talking to a lot of those folks that been experienced with those managing these groups and whatnot. So these community groups are a way for us to organize chaos, and you know, and I think that could be a solution for Cosmos, to be honest with you. But we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. More organized. That's definitely a big thing. But I think that's also like a natural side effect of not having that core entity that dictates the direction, right?
Correct.
It's like you naturally have more chaos. But I agree that definitely needs to be more structure and more organization around it. I also see people in the chat debating about, where was it? Debating about storage versus compute. That's actually a question I will ask you in a second. But yeah, let's talk more precisely about Akash network. I mentioned earlier, you guys have been around for so long. Core Cosmos, I would call you guys probably a blue chip Cosmos project. AKT, a must in every Cosmos portfolio, in my personal opinion. No financial advice. But what do you think people might get wrong or might underestimate or underappreciate about Akash network as a project? Because it's not that, flashy DeFi product with crazy yields, high APRs, you can make passive income. It's more of an infra project, right? So what do you think is the one thing maybe that people underestimate about Akash?
I think, a few things. If I had to start off, the main big thing is the impact on society. Right, modern society is glued together on this notion called cloud computing. Right, all our data, yours, mine, everything is processed or stored in the cloud today. Right, half of every dollar we pay to online services like Netflix and Asana goes to a cloud provider, either Amazon, Google, or Microsoft. Right, 80% of that market is controlled by 4 companies, and we don't know, but we pay an invisible Amazon tax. When Amazon goes down, half the internet goes down. That's how powerful it is, right? So it's such a powerful construct, um, and if you think, and if you just fathom the amount of control these companies have on your lives, it's just enormous, right? I think people don't understand that these companies are not elected, they're not regulated, they're not governed by the people. They're completely controlled by their figureheads, right? When you think about such an important part of a society, not is completely private, and you and I that use it so much have no say whatsoever, is scary, right? So now we're entering a new phase of computational, I would say, like, usage, where we're transitioning from humans like you and me using computers to machines using computers with artificial intelligence, right? So now we are seeing the limits of the existing cloud infrastructure. Why? Because the complexity of computation for AI is nearly doubling every 6 months. Sorry, doubling every 6 months, right? So the GPU needs, which essentially are the chips that AI runs on, are so high that it takes about 6 weeks from NVIDIA to get you A100 chips. You can't even get them on Amazon anymore because Amazon exclusively, reserves those chips for high-paying customers. So if you're a startup company, you want to do AI, it's impossible to get that on Amazon. So we're starting to see the system break down. Of course, private companies are going to optimize for profits. That's how they're set up, right? The only way to reverse that is to take the control back from these cloud companies, right? So the most significant feature will be coming out with Akash in the next few months is GPUs. One of the interesting facts is there are about, as far as I estimate in our own interactions, about 80,000 GPUs uh, that were purchased for about $19 billion to mine Ethereum. Uh, Ethereum,
19 billion.
$19 billion worth of GPUs are sitting idle post merge, and because GPUs are used to do proof of work mining. Now, all those GPUs need to see the light, and Akash with GPU capability will be targeting those GPUs. There are all kinds of GPUs. There are home computers that are mining computers, essentially, not our laptops. There's mining setups that have been there for a long time, to data centers like Hut 8 or Web3 Cloud. Just sitting on 20,000 GPUs idle, right? So the first impact of why Akash is important, obviously, we're going after very, very hard use cases that there's incredible demand, like GPUs, where it's impossible to get on the cloud. It's obvious natural fit for Akash, right? And you see less demand on the other elements because, well, if you go to a project and be like, okay, if you're using Amazon and use Akash, they'd be like, why I want to use Akash? Well, decentralization, but people don't care about decentralization. People don't care about control as much as you and I like to think. But what do they care is access, right? So it's cheap to get. I mean, even though Akash is like 80% cheaper, it's not that hard to get regular compute on Amazon. I mean, there's abundance of it. But I think GPUs are going to be one of those like killer use cases for Akash, and we already seen quite a lot of demand from AI companies, because now there is I don't know if you noticed, there is a resurgence of apps like Lensa. Everybody wants to do like the
Yeah.
avatar apps. Each like person, each training takes about, I would say like 30 minutes on a GPU, and a decent GPU. It costs about 10 to $20. So with Akash, you'll be able to reduce the price point to like $5 to $4, right? So it's starting to, like, now we're in this phase of like profit optimization for a lot of these like profile apps. There are tons of these apps that are coming out. Lensa alone was making $1 million a day when ChatGPT and all those launched like a month ago. So we are really excited to target that segment of the market with GPUs. And slowly, with GPUs, we'll have the core capabilities that are complete, and we'll start to get into this like better orchestration, better usability, to increase the adoption count for Akash Network. So we're super excited.
Yeah, you just said that's the core focus for this year. Is there any timeline or any rough estimate that you think that we can see the first GPUs?
Yeah, so we're looking at next 3 months. So again, beautiful thing about our new approach is all the updates, all the progress is now fully online on our website. Where GPUs are, how people are actually like, who's implementing it, when people are meeting to do this thing. So yes, we're expecting next 3 months. But then all our progress is going to be like fully public, and if people that are developers in the crowd that want to come help out, please check out our blog post that instructs us on how you can get involved into the steering committees and actually working groups to make GPU a reality. Somebody asked, could a average person from home can provide? Yeah, but we need developers to like add the capability. So we can pretty much now, any feature you want for Akash, you can go request and actually like start like pushing open settings. So and to answer your question, what are the differences between storage and compute, right? So cloud essentially, well, your computer too, right? You keep all your data on a storage network, and like a disk. Remember the thumb drives, right? When you're like storing some stuff, that thumb drive stores your data, but you need to plug the thumb drive to a computer in order to see the data, right? Process the data. That's the difference between storage networks and compute networks. Storage networks like Filecoin or RV and rest of ours are good to store your data, but you can't really do anything with the data, right? Unless you hook it to a computer. Now, the computer could be your own computer, or it could be a computer in the cloud. That's where Akash Network comes. Cloud computers are on all the time. Your computers are not on all the time. So that's the difference, right? And computers on the cloud are a lot faster. They're easy for customers to get to in terms of internet connection. They have like very, very fast commercial grade internet versus the home internet that you have. It's almost better to keep your cloud online, so you yourself can access them from any device that you want, and you can have powerful servers that serve the data to multiple customers beyond yourself. So yes, GPUs are going to be the number one sort of like priority, and then we already have storage. We also have storage in Akash, but that storage is not like like Filecoin or RV. That storage is limited to your deployment. So you still need a compute layer on top of that to access the storage. You can't directly access it, right? So with GPUs now we complete the full gamut of like compute and storage and bandwidth, and then we can finally unlock the user experience and the capabilities that we've been waiting to unlock.
What's the current landscape in crypto, the competitive landscape for, I mean, you just dropped, and there's also from Boss, who, it's your CTO, right?
Boss is our COO. There's another Boss, which is our CTO. Not to be confused.
So, yeah, he just dropped some names for, and you also about storage providers. What about cloud computing projects in crypto? Is there any like competition, partnerships that you have, conversations, or are you guys pretty much the only ones out there?
So Akash is the only marketplace for cloud compute. I don't think there's another marketplace that does generic compute. So that's very, very important. Akash is a GP or general purpose compute platform. We call it GP, compute platform, where there are other compute platforms like Golum is the first one, but that is a very supercomputer specific, very specific type of compute platform designed to run very specific types of tasks. Whereas you also have something like iexec, which came before Akash, and very similar, specialized compute. They're not a general purpose compute. That means you can't run a website on iexec. You have to only run like background workers, right? So Akash is the first general purpose open marketplace. Then we have quite a lot of like copycats that came after Akash that try to put like a spin or compare themselves for the token communities, but technically they're just different products. Another product that comes to my mind is Flux, because they just make a lot of noise, and the community is extremely toxic. So, but again, Flux is computers on Raspberry Pi, right? It's not they pride themselves as AWS of crypto, but we are trying not to be AWS. So there's a huge difference. We're not AWS. The point of Akash is not to have an AWS, right? It's not. That's the whole point. The AWS in-house has inherent problems that Akash is trying to solve, whereas not replicate a crypto version of it, which is a bad way to look at things, in my opinion. So yeah, we're not AWS, right? We are very unique. We're a marketplace. And Akash, the point of Akash is to aggregate all the compute and give the control to the user to choose what provider you want. AWS may very well tomorrow, if you want to be part of Akash ecosystem, they can be. Akash is permissionless and no one can stop them, right? So we're not trying to replace AWS. We're actually trying to build a better world where AWS and Google and Microsoft and everybody, all the big providers, are part of the Akash, compute marketplace.
Yeah, I also had a call yesterday with Fala Network. I don't know anything about them, to be honest, but they were saying that they're kind of like the Akash Network equivalent for Polkadot, which I don't want to talk about Fala, but I want to talk about the architectures between Cosmos, which you guys chose very early on to build on, versus something like Polkadot or something like Avalanche or even Ethereum. So what made you choose to build on Cosmos rather than anything else out there? And you guys were like, that was like probably 3 years ago, right? 3 years ago. Way ahead of
2018.
Yeah. So way ahead of IBC even went live.
Before even Cosmos SDK was around, so it's way before.
So what was the core decision of like doing that, and do you regret it, or what would you make different if you would be in that position again, if you would do anything different?
Well, to answer your question, I wouldn't regret a thing. I think it was the best decision we made. Although it seemed painful at the time, it was, looking back now, it's the best decision we made. So for a little history behind the evolution of blockchain for Akash, right? So Overclock Labs, began as a centralized company in 2015. And then we went decentralized in 2016 to create an edge computing marketplace. And we went decentralized because the architecture demanded so, right? Without getting into technical, we were technology first decentralized, not the token, right? We actually didn't have a token per se for Akash. We originally built a prototype on Ethereum using ETH actually as a payment. And then we were like experimenting with the prototype, and CryptoKitties launched, I believe, in 2017. This was the time frame, and it crashed the entire Ethereum network with 40,000 users. And then we decided that in order to build a scalable infrastructure network, we cannot rely on Ethereum, stability, right? And we also saw the gas prices like shoot up the roof, at that time, right? So we really understood, we really saw what scale can do to something like an Ethereum, right? So that's when we made the conscious decision of building our own L1. And building an L1 is not the easiest thing to do. So we are looking for solutions. Fortunately, we found this amazing library called Tendermint in our research, which also happened to have the same technology stack as we were, Golang. We were a Golang shop. My background, I've been early contributor to Kubernetes ecosystem from 2013 timeframe. So if you look at my GitHub, you'll see a lot of my libraries are still used by Kubernetes, Docker, HashiCorp, even Amazon Web Services, in fact, uses my code still. So I've been early Golang developer. I've been trending in my repos. Have been trending in top Golang, on GitHub for like several times, right? So it really resonated that it's number one Golang, which is amazing, and number two, it provides a core part, the most difficult part of building a blockchain, which is consensus, the consensus algorithm. So Tendermint BFT was invented by Jae Kwon. And he wrote a paper. We were very, very impressed by it. And they did the first implementation, I think in like 2018, 2017 timeframe. Very early, we adopted it. There were just enormous amounts of bugs. It was a very painful sort of like adaptation, but it's way better than building ourselves, right? So we'd rather work with other people, because the more people work on something, the better it gets in terms of security, because you have more eyes on the code base, right? So always very, very important to create a shared code base that people can adapt. If you have a isolated code base, you end up doing a lot of work. Polygon went through this, right? So Polygon was the initial fork of Cosmos, the fork Tendermint, but at some point they diverged, and then they had all kinds of security issues. They couldn't, re-merge from the upstream. So it's very, very important to stay sync with the upstream on a shared code base. So that was our core thesis in terms of how we should develop software. And in 2019, we launched a bunch of testnets, and then using the old version of Tendermint. By the way, Cosmos SDK came about on top of Tendermint in 2018, long after we started using Tendermint. Cosmos in Tendermint, the way it works is you have a bunch of modules you develop. So on top of this consensus library, and because there were no modules, we ended up writing all the modules, the account module, the staking module, all the fundamental things you get with Cosmos SDK. We wrote them, right? With Cosmos, our own versions, and then we obviously don't want to maintain our versions. We want sync back to the upstream. So we completely refactor the code base by end of 2019. We threw away all our Tendermint code, like 70,000 lines, and replaced that with Cosmos SDK. That was a huge effort because the Tendermint was going out of sync, and very, very painful. I don't want to, Jack Sampling was involved. Jack was working with Akash for a little bit. He was head of product. I don't know how many people know that. It was a very, very special time, and we were like all trying to push. And we finally launched the first version, the IBC version of Akash in 2020. It became the first IBC chain after Cosmos Hub. So the first IBC transaction ever happened between Akash and Cosmos Hub, because we were the first experimental chain to implement this thing, because nobody was able to make progress that fast, at least at that time. And really at that time it was what, us and Kava was the other chain, if you remember them. And the other chains that were live back then were Kava, and then we had
IrisNet was also an early one, huh?
which one?
IrisNet.
Iris was around for a long time, yes, but they were not. They were also like, they were very close to like IBC implementation, right? They might have launched the IBC before us, but we were the first IBC transaction for some reason. Anyway, but it was very like Iris was an OG chain. Very few people, right? And then Osmosis came like in 2021. Launched Akash as the first like token they listed besides Osmo and Ion, because pool number 3 and pool number 4 are Akash pools, right? Because they wanted to, and because Akash was the first IBC chain, so you get the advantage of like being the first and like just being there. The APRs, I remember, for the first day was 3,000% on Osmosis for Akash pools. So I was the first LP, obviously, because it's Akash, first decentralized DEX for Akash.
Yeah.
Yeah, I aped in. It was the best ape I've ever of my life. And I haven't sold a single Osmo that I accumulated since. That's just staking.
Nice. Yeah, I remember those days. The 4-digit APRs on Osmosis. Even for staking, Osmo was like 4 digits, right? In the beginning.
Oh, yeah, 4 digits. It was amazing.
That's wild. Yeah.
Kind of miss those days, but
yeah. Well, it's been a wild ride though, and I think honestly, like, I feel especially this year, Cosmos is in a good position to like really break through. Yeah, like I made a video about this also a few days ago where I said, for the Cosmos ecosystem to get really, a lot of new eyeballs into the ecosystem, new users, mainstream adoption, liquidity, and all these kind of things, I think Atom needs a push to the top 10. And I think there needs to be 2-3 other coins, like Osmo. AKT also needs to go, climb up the rankings. But I feel like a lot of people are very interested in this app chain thesis. They're very interested and excited when they see already what's existing in Cosmos. Akash's core infrastructure. I'm not aware of other projects and other ecosystems that are so fundamental and so far and so innovative. Osmosis also, right? They pioneered superfluid staking. You don't see that anywhere else. So I think once people start doing their research in Cosmos, they are really hooked and get stuck with the ecosystem. So what do you think for this year, 2023? What is your Cosmos outlook for this year? And how do you guys with Akash want to position yourselves to maybe benefit also in case a Cosmos would really go viral this year?
So, I think like a big challenge for Cosmos is composability. Cosmos systems in general, IBC in general. So if you solve composability, I think we solve a lot of problems in general, right? So IBC ecosystem or Cosmos ecosystem is incredible because it's so diverse in terms of the types of blockchains that you get, and it is extremely usable, right? A lot of these app chains are extremely nice. I mean, Osmosis is beautiful to use, right? But what it lacks is for Akash to cross compose with Osmosis really well. So you have IBC, but it's not as good as Ethereum composability, for example. And it's just very challenging, especially to compose across different systems. Is a distribution systems problem, right? So I think that composability, and we have few ways with shared security, and like there's a lot of work that's happening with composability. I think shared security in whatever form it could be, like mesh security, or it could be like ICS. I'm not going to pick a winner yet. We still yet to see. But I think with a lot of these foundations are just going to make hyper composable systems. And people are going to realize the power. Like, give you an example, what that looks like when you have hyper-composed systems, right? When you have interchain accounts actually work, um, you can essentially have a DAO on Juno, like a DAO on Juno, own a deployment directly on Akash. That means in order to make, because Akash, with interchain accounts, you can have wallets own different assets on different blockchains, right? Deployment being an asset, right? What that means is today a big challenge for DAOs is institutional risk, right? That means it doesn't matter how decentralized an organization is. And say, for example, you're Osmosis, right? Uh, your Osmosis is fundamentally a smart contract, but nobody uses a smart contract directly. Nobody uses a command line. You always use a browser to access Osmosis. That is behind a DNS name, right? That is a big attack vector. So if somebody wants to attack Osmosis, they can attack the DNS, right? So you almost don't want attack, put whoever can attack in a broad way. So you almost don't want a DNS-led attack vector, discovery service. You want a chain-based discovery service. And the way you do that is to have the entire supply chain be fully transparent. The supply chain from production of the code to the deployment of the code. So where Akash can help you is the deployment of the code. So by removing the control from a human being, transition the control where a human being clicks deploy to a DAO doing it automatically after it meets certain conditions, maybe like threshold vote or whatnot, you move the human risk out of the deployment, right? So, and that can happen with strong interchain accounts, with shared security. It's not possible today quite a lot from like Osmosis deploying directly without a human being onto Akash. When you see use cases like that, it'll blow your mind because you never see something like this in Ethereum, right? Ethereum has no workable cloud computing platform. Cosmos is the only ecosystem with a functioning cloud computing, on-chain cloud computing, right? So, and it's so diverse. You see something like Regen, right? Regen has this like carbon credits, right? Like that's so diverse and it really works in Cosmos. And we are seeing quite a lot of applications moving to Cosmos. You're looking at DYDX, you're looking at potentially Compound, we're looking at quite a lot of these like chains realizing that we can do a lot more when you have control and sovereignty, and when you have the power of shared code base, right? So and I think end of the year composability will get solved. I want to see shared security get solved, and shared security will open up and will lower the barrier of entry for a lot of applications. That will further enhance network effects. And it'll also make Atom the center in terms of value accrual. So I'm super excited. I mean, none of this is financial advice, but I think Atom is going to go top 10 easy. I mean, I don't see it. I think now Ethereum, like Cosmos, I saw a report yesterday. Not sure. I think it was from Tribe Capital that said Cosmos is like the second largest ecosystem after Ethereum in terms of developers, right? It took over Bitcoin actually in terms of development activity. So it's growing, and you don't hear one bad thing about Cosmos. People don't talk bad stuff about Cosmos. People talk bad stuff about everything else. But even like Vitalik said, he has deep respect for Cosmos ecosystem.
Yeah.
So it's very rare to see like people like that appreciate a completely different ecosystem that held to its ethos. People say a lot of things about Jaquan, but one thing you gotta appreciate is the strength in which the values are still upheld, even till date. Without a founder, talks a lot about the fundamental nature of the ecosystem and the system he created and gave to us, right? So it's incredible. I think we had to take a moment to appreciate the people that built the ecosystem and think about the moment when they were in the drawing room and thinking about all these problems that we're seeing today and solving for those problems ahead of time. So I'm incredibly lucky. I think this is the best ecosystem I could ever pick. And we're here to serve the Cosmos ecosystem, where we're Cosmos first. We're going to start with decentralization all the way from compute, but also like process decentralization. A lot of experimentation that we're doing with groups and whatnot. we're going to be able to export that out to the rest of the ecosystem, right? Hopefully, steer the way people look at organization structures, while taking examples from Akash. All the meetings, all the work we do is now public, right? Stored on GitHub, archived, so people can actually like roll back and be like, hey, how did this? Like, you want to start a group? What was the first meeting like? What do people say in those meetings? All that is like public. So it's good to build systems that way.
What would you say is the biggest strength of Cosmos? Is it the amount of active development there, the diversity of the ecosystem? Is it the app chain thesis that might be superior to the Fed protocols out there? What would you say is like the biggest strength in Cosmos?
I mean, I would say two main pillars, which is the developers and the model, right? The developers obviously make the model. The model is the app chain thesis. Very, very similar. It's very analogous to Web 2, right? So you see in Web 2 where Firebase, I helped Firebase launch. I've been part of that whole, I've seen the whole process, and I love that, product. The beautiful thing about Firebase is it lets you launch applications rapidly, right? And once you launch an application, you use Firebase to a point where you hit scale, and when you hit scale, you change to a more dedicated database, right? So, but if you don't launch that rapidly and iterate quickly, you will not be able to actually, use a dedicated database. So Cosmos' strength is, attracting developers that have a lot of experience dealing with Ethereum and hitting its limits, or any fat chain protocol, right? Ethereum just being the biggest one, and understanding the limitation of a fat protocol, now want to actually scale and come to Cosmos. So it's sort of like graduating step for blockchain projects. And the advantage of that is you're going to have very mature developers come actually start on Cosmos, versus on Ethereum anyone can deploy a smart contract. So you see a lot of scams. So with the advantage of Cosmos is it has a very natural selection process without permission. No one's telling you, stopping you from using Cosmos. But in order to use Cosmos, you need to know what the hell you're doing. Without that, you can get in trouble. So that creates a natural selection process that attracts high quality developers to the ecosystem. I think that's an underrated feature of Cosmos ecosystem, the natural selection for high quality developers. And another big feature is the decentralization nature of it. And I'm like, every day I wake up, I'm like, this is amazing, because it's not a single leader makes a decision. In fact, there was a proposal recently in Cosmos that was created by the elders, Zaki and Jack, about the Atom 2.0 that got rejected by the community. And that just tells you how much involved the community is. I mean, again, not to get into nuances as to why it was rejected or whatnot, but that just tells you that this community deeply cares and are very, very active, right? So that decentralization nature is extremely powerful. So when you combine high quality developers and hyper decentralized systems, you get Cosmos. And it's very unique to Cosmos. There's no other ecosystem that has this model. And the best part is all organic, right? It's not something that people wrote and designed a thesis and designed a paper. This is how communities are built. It's all organic. So I'm extremely amazed and by watching Cosmos ecosystem every day.
You just dropped a compound. I don't know if you know anything about that, but do you think after DYDX fully migrates and launches their own chain, do you think other DeFi blue chips or major Ethereum dApps are going to move over to Cosmos?
I have to. I mean, they have to move to an app chain, right? So you look at who provides app chains. I think now both Cosmos and Polkadot and avax also want to do the app chain. I mean, they just change their branding depending on what's convenient for them, but they're calling their subnets as app chains, right? Because they see app chain getting popular. Avalanche. Yeah. So the choice is really Cosmos, Polkadot, and Avalanche. The challenge with Polkadot is the substrate programming model is extremely broken. It's not great to work with compared to Golang, which is Cosmos, and Cosmosm, which is Rust-based, right? So there are multiple entry points for developers in Cosmos, which is amazing. It could be a Rust programmer, it could be a Golang program, doesn't really matter. So So I think like just from like maturity of an ecosystem, and considering like people that want to move to Cosmos are not amateurs, they are mature developers, right? They're looking for something that's scalable, that's already working. They're very unlikely going to take a chance of something that's not yet working, like Cosmos, like Dot or Avalanche, right? Like, so it's very, very hard, to be honest with nothing wrong. I'm not against like Polkadot and whatnot. I think it's just going to be extremely hard to attract mature developers, advanced developers, when you don't have a functioning system. Just doesn't happen, because the reason why people are moving to Cosmos is not because Ethereum is, you know, bad or anything, but the fat protocol thesis just they grew beyond fat protocol thesis, right? Like DYDX is like they can't scale anymore in Ethereum; it's just not possible. So they want their own chain. So they're not looking for a new blockchain; they're looking to have their own chain, right? So the competition is there. I don't see how Avalanche or sorry, Avalanche or Parity, Polkadot is going to compete with such an existing and massive ecosystem. So very bullish.
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting. I also feel like, especially when you talk about the Polkadot world, substrate world, I think also their Canary network thesis had some issues. It's also being used in a weird way. You know, some projects are not even deploying on Polkadot. Some are just skipping Kusama and want to only focus on Polkadot. But yeah, interesting stuff. And maybe that can be a whole separate session one day to talk with you about that, and maybe with, you know, a developer from another of these one ecosystems to just compare the architectures, and maybe they migrate over to Cosmos after that. So who knows? But I want to talk, as we're almost at an hour, I want to talk the last few minutes about a little bit about AKT, and then also get some community questions. So AKT is the native coin that fuels the Akash network, which is an L1, a sovereign layer 1 blockchain built on Cosmos, right? IBC enabled. We talked about that, which means that the native use cases are to secure the chain, as well as participation in governance. There's also interesting proposals now recently. I mean, there's so much we could still talk about today, but maybe we need another session for that. But yeah, maybe talk about some of the specific use cases to AKT, and maybe some of the things around the tokenomics that are in the works, or that might adjust over the next year or so.
Absolutely. So AKT token is essentially a native token, like Stakecito said. It's used for securing the Akash network. Akash network being the proof of stake, layer 1. It needs a token to secure it. It's also the primary way to pay for resources, and it provides incentivization for participation both in terms of governance. It also gives developer incentives, and slowly it's moving to be the native token. So the big changes we are proposing very soon. We have now a SIG economics group that will be proposing the change, is to introduce a stable payment mechanism. Because the challenge right now, because AKT is volatile, it's good to pay for like short running applications, like, hey, you want a task, but it's bad for long running, like websites. Because your website is running for 10 days, AKT price moves quite a lot. So you're either overpaying or underpaying, right? So that's not happy case. So we are introducing stable settlement using a blue chip, stable coin like USDC, or something that is going to be Cosmos native. Obviously, that's a big requirement, right? And introducing a model that doesn't undermine AKT itself. So if you use a stable coin for payments, which you can, but AKT still accrues value from this stable settlement using a form of a tax, which is also governed by the community. So if people want lower tax, they can actually make a proposal to lower the tax, right? So we're going to settle using USDC, but you pay a tax to AKT holders in order to use USDC. That tax will be further used to fund the development of the platform. So we're going to be creating an on-chain dev fund, and part of that fees is going to be burnt by actually purchasing AKT off market using osmosis or whatnot and burning a portion of the AKT. So now that indirectly accrues value for AKT, right? So we are solving the user experience without compromising the AKT value, because AKT value is inherently or directly proportional to the security of the network. If AKT value is lower, the security of the network is lower because of the proof of stake. So it's inherently of interest to the Akash protocol that AKT value accrues and increases over time, right? To secure the network as we get more usage and as we start taking on more workloads, right? So this is a very natural way, because more usage means more stable settlements. More stable settlements means more increased value for Akash token.
And what's the estimated timeline for? I guess that has to go through on-chain governance, anyways, right? So what's the
whole thing is on-chain governance? It goes through a fully publicly vetted discussion. The people that like it, people that don't like it. I think most of them like burning of AKT.
I'm sure.
In fact, we have a kickoff meeting on 26th. On how to participate. If you want to actually contribute, you can now, because of a new model, you can actually start contributing and start actually helping us write the spec. So we'll write the spec very soon. We're expecting that spec to be ready in 2 weeks at least, and then we'll have an on-chain proposal for anybody to develop it. Maybe any Cosmos developer out there can actually help us write this module, and of course that's incentivized. We'll fund that in a fully open setting. If all goes well, we should have the economics in a couple of months.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah,
up to date, almost real time using our website.
So GPUs, stable pay, tokenomic upgrade proposal. There's a lot of stuff in the works, and also with Stakecito, we're just also now in the active set of Akash, so that's also exciting, and hope to get more involved there as well. Should we do you still have a few minutes for final quick questions from the Twitter thread that I made?
Absolutely. If you actually click on the projects list, I put in private chat, and if you can share that with the community, that's the list of projects that we have right now going on Akash. So you can see, it's a lot more than 2.
There we go. Cool. Yeah, and also, by the way, I wanted to mention this, right? Akash Network, AKT, right now ranked 404 according to CoinGecko, $86 million fully diluted valuation, deep liquidity and osmosis. But also, you guys have listings on a lot of major exchanges, right? Such as Kraken, Huobi as well. So yeah,
there are more exchanges as well this year. I think that's going to be a whole broad Cosmos. I think people are starting to realize that Cosmos assets are very valuable. But yeah, we have centralized exchanges as well. Kraken being the number one. It's pretty good for US users. Huobi as index for non-US users.
Yeah. And probably the most bullish thing for Akash for this whole century probably is that Coney Daddy is back, I guess. I saw him tweeting a little bit, so maybe he's also going to be back with some content there. But let's make some questions from Twitter. I made a tweet. There's so many responses. We won't be able to go through all of these. Some are personal, some are just about the project, some about Cosmos. And let's make a quick fire round here. Moultrie is asking, what is the hardest part about leading a cryptocurrency project forward? And you as the founder, you probably have a lot of stories to tell about this.
Everything. Everything about it. I mean, first of all, you're operating as a founder, as an American-based company founder. You're operating in a very gray regulatory landscape. Even though Akash has nothing to do with finance or NFTs, we don't have any speculative sort of element to Akash as a cloud computing network. We are treated the same way as a finance project by the regulators and legislators, which is completely unfair. So just fighting the regulatory battle, and second is the developing a product in a fully decentralized way without taking shortcuts is very, very hard for developer experience, user experience, right? How do you, a big challenge right now is adoption for Akash because there's no easy way to use Akash. So developing an interface without using any tools that you have in Web 2, like Web 2 apps, if you ask me to develop, you know, we'll roll it out in like day with a Stripe login, done. You know, like we don't have the same comfort as product builders in Web3, and it's very, very challenging to build such products, right? If you think about it, the DeFi user pattern was invented by Uniswap. Before Uniswap, nobody had a DeFi usage pattern, right? So unfortunately, the NFT usage pattern was created by OpenSea, which is a centralized company. So all the NFT platforms are very, very centralized, right? But since Uniswap did the first like UX pattern for DeFi, it worked out really well. So we need something like that in cloud computing, or like whatever category we create, we need to create a UX pattern. Inventing a new UX pattern from the ground up is not the easiest thing, especially for a founder, right? And we have some irons in the fire there. And dealing community is a double-edged sword, right? Especially when token go up, community is happy. Token go down, community is mad. Just dealing with that, not getting distracted, is a big challenge. I think the biggest challenge overall is going to be staying focused, and staying focused in a healthy way. As a founder, we ignore health a lot. I've been doing this for over 7 years. I've destroyed my health so much, right, in these 7 years. But last few years, I've been putting a lot of work in terms of renewing and recharging. Actually, last 1 year, I've been working very hard. And today, I finally feel that I'm at a state where I have incredible energy and I have incredible focus along with the energy. So to really, really do what you do, you have to focus on staying healthy. Healthy, eating well, getting good exercise, and getting good sleep. And sleep is a privilege that a lot of us, don't have. So we try to like create pockets. Like when you have to push like something like Akash, a website that we launched today, I didn't sleep well for like the last 1 week. But when I'm not in this like crazy mode, I try to sleep at least 7 hours, right? So good sleep, good water. And just staying very, very strong mental and health and physically gives you the ability to execute a crypto project. If anybody wants to start a crypto project, my advice is not to do it.
Yeah, I can feel you. Yeah, I mean, I can also
really believe it. You really believe it. If you want to make money, AI projects are minting money. Trust me, you can go build an AI project or something. But if you really, unless you really believe in what you're doing, don't try.
Yeah. Yeah, I've also seen founders left and right, and in the previous bear market especially, but even now we see projects just shutting down, or they just don't survive anymore, run out of funding. So it's a very tough industry. And like you said, also in a bull run, there's a lot of noise, a lot of pressure to keep ship things faster. In a bear market, you just have a lot of mad people that want to make your life hard. But my question is, how do you do you prefer the bull run, when everything is crazy going up, everyone is very excited, but I guess the downside is that you have a lot of noise and external pressure? Or do you prefer building in a bear market where there's probably less noise, but if there's noise, it's like angry people?
I prefer building in a bear market, selling in a bull market.
Okay.
So don't try to build in a bull market. You're not going to make progress. It's going to be very hard, very distracting, because bull markets are about narratives, and you got to adapt to the narratives, and it's just so many sort of like external market pressures. Whereas bear market is like I can relax and be like, okay, focus on health, eating well, sleeping well, and building, right? Not just rushing into things. Like I was able to cook like and exercise like a couple hours a day and build the entire website from scratch in 15 days and ship it. So I was, being hyper productive at the same time and great healthy, right? And that's only possible in a bear market. In bull market, I don't think that could even come close. So it's not I prefer one over the other. It's the nature of order, right? Like it's natural order that I don't want to mess with. I think it usually takes about 1 year of deep bear market to build, another year of narrative building in a bear market. So it usually takes 2 years between the cycles. And I love bear markets because there's less distraction. All the tokens, I'm risk off, right? I just stake and restake, and I don't touch them, right? I don't take too many risks, and so it doesn't really matter. Like the token goes up, goes down, because none of the movements right now matters. What matters is what happens in 2 years, right? If you're, of course, I mean, we'd be lying to ourselves if you're not here to make profits, right? So so it really so try to like stay away from like this menial price movements that you get in a bear market. You get like ups and downs, and all those are,
Yeah.
though, who knows, like try to DCA to lower your risk. Right now all the assets are incredibly priced, especially Cosmos assets are incredibly priced. Again, none of this financial advice, but I am starting to buy now, actually, slowly. We're starting to see kind of a bullish sentiment a little bit. Buy in the sense I always DCA. I don't like try to wait for the right price, right? Because it's just impossible. It could go down further, but I think I'll DCA as it gets down further, right? Or dollar cost averaging. So if you have $100, don't spend all the $100. Spend $10 and wait for the whole entire year to spend the $100. I mean, like every month you look at the scenario, another $10, another $10, and $10, right?
I mean, right now, like you said, there's so many large discounts across the board, especially in Cosmos, right? Like 70, 80, 90%. And I think especially if Cosmos really gets traction fast, and it really gets this mainstream adoption, like things can go really fast. So, and I like what you said, like what matters is what's happening in 2 years. But I think, and I keep saying this also in my videos, you can kind of get a feeling for where this project might be headed towards in 2 years from now, right? By just talking to the founders, observe what are they doing during the bear market? Are they almost giving up? Are they focused? Are they building, right? And just hearing you guys constantly building, shipping, being excited about, making an announcement to open source, the process of writing the code. That's all that stuff. Like that's an indication, like you guys are building, right? And I feel like a lot of Cosmos projects are actually in that state. So to wrap it up, besides AKT, obviously, and Atom, I heard you're also an Atom bull and probably also an Osmo bull. What is your top 3, maybe top 4 Cosmos projects besides these?
Besides Akash, right? That's obvious, right?
Yeah.
I personally hold, Atom, Osmosis, and Juno. Each of these projects are unique for me, and I would say those 3 are my top in Akash, right? That's my entire portfolio. I don't really have others, and obviously Atom is the mother. Osmosis, I've been involved in the project from the beginning, and I haven't sold a single Osmo. And I was restating when Osmo was $10, So, and I think the team is just phenomenal, and Sunny is incredible, and they move fast. I look at the builders, right? How much people are shipping. That's what matters. And Juno really showed us how to unlock community, the power of community, right? A lot of the ideas of our open sourcing process itself came from DAO, and really looking at like looking at Jake and others, how they carry themselves, how they organize themselves, especially being in the Bay Area. It's very inspirational to look at Juno. So I hold projects that I have deep respect, and the community is what makes Juno very, very powerful. And those are my blue chips. I also hold a little bit of DVPN, but I have no idea where the project is going. To be honest with you, it's unfortunate that there's some rumors about it's.
There were some I think internal, like which teams are now like building the main applications, but I don't know. It's crypto, so everything is possible anytime, and it's all most of it open source. So just people do whatever they want. But yeah, anyways, really appreciate your time. We're well over an hour. There have been constantly almost 85 people in here. So Cosmos is in a bull run for sure. At least if you look at the people that are interested in learning about Cosmos. Any final words, anything, for somebody that might be completely new to Akash, but that watched now the entire stream, 1 hour and 10 minutes, where would they get started? Where would you send them? What should they take a look at if they wanted to learn more about Akash or even build or use Akash?
So Akash.network, we just launched a new website. Go check it out. It's incredible. If you go there, you'll see a blog post on top that talks about public cloud is public utility. Click on it. You can right now contribute to Akash. Be a user, amazing. But I think if you go to the last section of the blog post, we have different types of users and how they can contribute to Akash, all the way from non-technical or non-programmers, but a little technical, to non-technical folks. Obviously, we're looking for programmers to contribute to our community groups and be part of this grand experiment, we call it. This grand decentralization experiment. It's only possible with contributors from the public. So it's a call to action for us. If we succeed, and when we succeed, we're aiming for this model to be exported to the rest of the Cosmos ecosystem and how to organize groups. What are the frameworks? What to look for? What not to look for? How do you deal with conflicts? How do you deal with misaligned values? There's a lot of experimentation we're doing in organizational structures and organizational frameworks with special interest groups. So I really invite ecosystem to come check us out and reach out to us and participate in these groups. So like the saying goes, we can go faster alone, or we can go further together. Right? The point is to go further and for a long time, and a single company can't, and that's very evident. So we can only do it together.
That's the spirit. There we go. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks, Greg. Hope we can do this soon. And we'll see you again. Take care, guys.
Thank you so much.